Hey, welcome everybody to the Career Invincibility Radio Show. This is Christine Parakis, your host today, and I'm super excited about our guest, Verne Harnish, who's been an inspiration to me and my work, and I can't wait to share him with you and to be able to give you such huge value that I know we're going to get here. Verne is the founder of the world-renowned Entrepreneurs Organization with over 14,000 members worldwide, and chaired for 15 years EO's premier CEO program, The Birthing of Giants, held at MIT. It's a program that he still teaches today. He's the founder and CEO of Scaling Up, a global executive education and coaching company with over 180 partners on 6 continents. Verne has spent the past 3 decades helping companies scale up. He's the author of the bestseller Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, translated into 9 languages. He's along with the editors of Fortune, authored The Greatest Business Decisions of All Times that Jim Collins wrote the foreword for. And his latest book, my Bible, The Scaling Up, The Rockefeller Habits 2.0, has won 8 major international book awards, including the prestigious International Book Award for Best General Business Book. If you have a business and you don't have a copy of this book, listen to the end of this show and go out and get it, because it is the most incredible tool and consolidation of value in terms of growing business. And we are going to get to talk about this directly. Verne, welcome to our show.
Christine, thank you for that wonderful introduction, and glad you're a fan. It is definitely a labor of love to help these scale-ups around the globe. They are the first responders for our economy right now.
Well, it's amazing, Verne, that you are, really been so incredibly generous, because, we may invest in the book, but you've actually put the tools in our hands that we can use without having to call you and try to get your time. That's an amazing thing to me.
Well, we didn't want it to be a teaser. We actually wanted it to be very much a how-to book, and we have, companies all over the globe that just, spend a few dollars, get the book, and they're able to execute. So we've tried to really be open source with everything that we're doing.
Well, I think that's an incredible mission. And I know that you've worked with the Fortune 100s, the top companies in the world. But what I find really incredible is that I feel that your work is scalable downwards, right? That it's accessible for the startup and the emerging growth and the small businesses too. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's mainly has to do with growth mindset. So those that we work with inside the large companies are those that have this kind of growth mindset, and startups that know that they want to go big, use our tools as well. So it's really more of a mindset, Christine, than it is, where somebody's at right now in terms of size of company.
Well, that makes it very accessible. And, I guess it's the question is, you're in different modes when you're in a startup, right? And compared to an ongoing concern where things are stabilized and your growth is not so accelerated, how might you approach these tools and resources differently if you're in that early stage place?
Yeah, it's always tough because, Jim Collins talks about you got to get the right butts in the right seats. So we put together a list of seats. And, if you're a startup and you're the solo entrepreneur, your name's in every seat. You're doing everything. And all scaling up is figuring out who can you delegate, not abdicate. Delegation's one of those topics that I have an MBA, but they never taught me anything about it. And it's a critical skill for the entrepreneur to learn, because as you know, 76% of companies are run just by the solo entrepreneur. And we like to joke that some of those companies are overstaffed. And so, for sure. So, it's somebody who really is tired of kind of handling the chaos all alone and need to get in some other people, whether they're outsourcing it or they're hiring teams. And at that point, you start to kind of enter a rarefied space where you've got to figure out how to delegate to others. And it requires some systems and approach that, again, you're not normally taught it at any, startup factory activity or in an MBA. And so that's why we came along to provide that curriculum and approach.
Well, it's trial by fire, right? And I think back as you were speaking, it reminded me of my last startup where we went from 100% equity funding to a $10 million a year company in 4 years. And it was always putting out fires, and the loneliness and isolation at the top in the C-suite. My partner was out generating revenue, and I was managing a team ultimately of 160 people and trying to keep the doors open. Dealing with cash flow and managing people the size of which I'd never managed before. And I didn't know about your book back then. How tragic was that? I had no idea how to juggle, how to do, and there's no one I felt like I could talk to. And so, these are the people I feel that need to hear from you the most, because they might be trying to do it all themselves and not really understand that there's some tools out there to get started.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a little bit like parenting, Christine. The children don't come with a manual, but what I've learned over the years, raising 4 myself, is that there are some steps that they have to go through that are common across all children as they grow up. And it really is the same across scale-ups. And so once founders realize, hey, I'm not alone, that others are going through exactly the same kind of chaos that you've got to try to manage as you scale up like you did, then they find that first there's some kindred spirits, and that there really is some approaches to kind of make that easier. The big thing is that's one of my opening chapters, the barriers chapter. Alan Rudy, who I was just talking to again last week, in his first company, ExpressMed, the poor guy was working 80-hour weeks just trying to keep the wheels from falling off. And once we got in there and got some of our tools in place, he was able to reduce that to about 8 hours, the time it took for him to manage the business. It didn't mean he quit working. He could just spend it more on the activities than it allowed him to scale and ultimately scale to 60 million and sell it successfully. And that takes a lot of time. But if your head's down just trying to manage the chaos, it's difficult to get around to those things. So that's, again, why we wrote the book and put the tools together.
Well, can we talk a bit about what those tools are and how to implement them when you're starting out and you have no idea?
You bet. So we thought, first of all, let's kind of break it down into 4 buckets. I wish business was this organized, but in general, you've got some decisions to make around the people side, the strategy, the execution, and the cash. And so everything we do is color-coded, as is the book and the 4 sections of the book, as well as our tools. And so there is just some things to do in each of those 4 areas. What's important is there's really not an order to it. It's like Sudoku puzzles and crossword puzzles. My partner, who runs our global coaching organization, he scaled up a significant company to about 650 employees himself and sold to a $2 billion company. He does the New York Times crossword puzzles every day. And like a crossword puzzle, you do the easy ones first. If you're someone, and often COOs or CFOs are quite methodical, but if you approach our methodology saying, look, I'm not going to box 2 till I figure out box 1, you're going to get badly stuck. So it really is an iterative process of working through these decisions and figuring out which ones you need to make next. And the key is really to focus on what is the most immediate next constraint. What is in your way? What's the rock in your way as you're climbing Everest that you need to address next? And to really work on anything else but that is a waste of time and effort. And that's what we really help the leaders get focused around, is what do we have to do next when I have 1,000 things on my plate?
Well, that's a hard decision to make, right? And I think about, you described it in 4 buckets. Cash was the last one. And, in my experience of being a serial entrepreneur, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, the cash flow is always an issue, and it feels more pressing than everything else. But maybe it's not the first bucket you go to. How do you decide?
Well, we have some professional assessment tools that help get to that, and it's why we have these coaching partners all over the globe. And by the way, they're not newbies. The average age is 53. They're experienced leaders, and having worked with lots of other companies, they're a little bit like a doctor who can kind of look at you and get a quick diagnosis of where the entry point is. And so, look, if you're not going to make payroll on Friday, we better get that issue addressed this week. But if you're growing broke, and a lot of companies are, then our ability to get in and really look at your financials and assess the situation, it could be that you're just missing a key member of the executive team. I'll tell you a quick story just so you know that you're never too big. I remember, I've known Michael Dell since his second year in business, and he grew that thing rapidly to about $1 billion, but was broke, ran out of cash. And that's when they brought in as kind of a first adult supervisor, Tom Meredith, who became a dear friend, and I referenced Tom in the book. And they realized that they were missing a couple of key components in their strategy, that if they weren't going to get that fixed, they were never going to solve the cash problem within the organization. And so that's why cash was the issue, but it wasn't the immediate answer that they needed to address. So that's what we do.
Well, so I guess, and you can't advocate it loudly enough, right? Get support, get somebody in your corner that's tread the path you've been on and can help see the 30,000 foot view, right? That's the ability these people, your team has, and people who can support these entrepreneurs to be able to gain perspective. When you're thick in it, it's very hard to do.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's a poor analogy, but I'm finally learning to play golf. And no, but it's like going out there and just start whacking away at the balls. You actually develop bad habits. And I went and got some professional help. And it was crazy how quickly I was able to get up the learning curve, and was out playing this past weekend, just 9 holes. Is about all the time I had, but it's the same with any sport. Nobody would expect to achieve peak performance without a coach. I don't know why we expect differently in other aspects of our lives.
Isn't that amazing? I feel as though we're bumping up against this notion that's probably cultural, that we have to be, we have to prove something, right? We have to be able to do it ourselves, or if we don't, there's something wrong. And I wonder if you experience or see in your clients that, I'll call it a secret shame, right? That what if I can't do it, or their secret fear is they're not capable of, and who among us is doing it all by ourselves to summit Mount Everest, which we hope is the business goal. But, do you feel like there's some pressure in our culture that we have to overcome, that we can just talk about out loud?
Well, we're working across 6 continents, and there definitely is cultural differences depending on the countries that we're in relative to openness for coaching. I have to say, in the United States, here probably in the last decade, the openness to it has increased dramatically. So I think most people have realized, and I really credit Bill Campbell and the book about his life, $1 Trillion Coach, that came out a year ago, and the fact that, Steve Jobs and Eric Schmidt at Google and some of the real titans of Silicon Valley, saw the need for a coach. I think it really opened up that field to everybody else. So I'm just glad it's beginning to, people are seeing the value of having a coach. But that's why, as you know, Christine, I referenced 40 other books in my book. We think it takes a village of gurus. I don't have all the answers. And one of the guys who we admire is Dan Sullivan with Strategic Coach. And Dan's the one actually put together a mindset tool for us. And so we literally test the mindset of the leaders that we're going to be working with to see if they're coachable. And if they're not, we know we're going to waste their time and they're going to waste our time.